Rain slicked the alley into a dark mirror, every neon pulse from the liquor store sign chopping the night into cold fragments. Detective Margaret Maggie Thompson, 58, stood over a scatter of cords and a battered field recorder, her hood beaded with water. The 911 call hissed in her earpiece, the sound that had dragged her out after midnight when she should have been home with tea and silence. Stakes bled through every second. Ignore a strange detail and someone's life goes to the morgue drawer. Misfile a clue and a city learns to distrust them a little more. She drew a slow breath. The alley tasted like wet asphalt and burnt diner coffee, the kind that leaked out the back door across the street. A man slept under a shopping cart canopy 2 doors down, his knees to his chest. Maggie set a folded emergency blanket on the crate by his feet and kept moving. The recording whispered back with a steady rhythm, a scratch, a pause, then 2 short ticks, like a trapped fingernail talking to anyone who would listen. Detective Charles Reed, 62, eased into the alley's glow, his suit shoulders dark with rain. He carried quiet like a tool. The 2 of them had worn their years in the work until the city no longer bothered to pretend it could surprise them. It still tried. Charles looked at the gear and the fat raindrops splashing into the case lid. "We need to look deeper than what they say," Maggie said. "They already said it was nothing," Charles replied. "That is why it interests me," Maggie said. She pressed the recorder back a few seconds and lifted it to her ear. Mrs. Dolores Rivera, 63, had called 911 from a third-floor walk-up that looked down on this alley. The dispatcher log showed slurred worry and a scattered story about scratch sounds and shadows. The watch commander had dismissed it as a raccoon going to war with a dumpster. Mrs. Rivera had been logged before as confused, as lonely, as the kind of caller you nod to and then forget. Maggie did not forget people who were easy to forget. "Listen," Maggie said. Charles bowed his head, rain dripping from his nose. He was the kind of man who counted desk drawers and kept every case number in his head for a week after closing. He tuned out the storm and let the scratch play. The sound came as a run of taps, quick, then a long pause, then fast again. The rhythm landed like a code she had not heard in years. "Could be Morse," Charles said. "Could be someone trapped," Maggie said. "We would have a body by now," Charles said. "Not if they planned the sound," Maggie said. She rewound. The alley turned quiet except for the rain and the drip of a clogged gutter. A long bus engine groaned 3 blocks away. She closed her eyes and counted with the beat, the way she had learned to trust small changes more than loud claims. ... pause, ... The harsh scratch sounded like metal on concrete, dragged with intention. "Mrs. Rivera said it was not an animal," Charles said. "People did not believe her," Maggie said. "Do you?" Charles asked. "I believe the exhausted," Maggie said. A box truck slid past the mouth of the alley, a hurricane of spray behind it, and in that roar the recording changed. A burst of static pushed through the taps, like the hand of someone behind the wall trying one last time to be heard. Maggie pulled the headphones away and hit playback again. "Again," Maggie said. "Say what you hear," Charles said. "Numbers," Maggie said. "You do it with me." They counted without saying what either believed. 1. Pause. 9. Too quick. 1 long. A gap, then 8 again, then 3. The sequence pushed through the interference like a message that did not want to be ignored. She did not like coincidences. She believed in design. "Someone is going to tell us it is rain on a pipe," Charles said. "Someone always will," Maggie said. "You think this is the call that ends a career or saves a life," Charles said. "I think we should act like it could be either," Maggie said. A distant siren curled over the rooftops and lingered in the wet air. Maggie crouched by the near wall. Scrape marks curved near a storm drain, shallow and recent. She touched the edge and pulled her hand back from the cold grit. The pattern on the concrete matched the tempo in the recording. Someone had dragged something in a rhythm until they ran out of strength or time. "Mrs. Rivera insisted," Charles said. "She said the scratch meant a word," Maggie said. "What word?" Charles asked. "Help," Maggie said. She glanced up at the windows. A lace curtain on the 3rd floor shifted, then stilled. She felt the pressure of the job on her sternum. The first 24 hours were always a race. Every minute you lose, someone else uses. She slid the recorder back a few seconds, and then they both heard it, clear through the static. The numbers again, but grouped this time. 721951. Not random, Charles said. They sometimes put badge numbers into codes, Maggie said. That is a hell of a claim, Charles said. Someone wants us to turn a key, Maggie said. Whose badge could it be? Charles asked. Maggie narrowed her eyes and let every badge number she had ever logged climb out of the dark. The sequence hit a memory like a tuning fork. Harlan King, 60, chief of police, mentor, the man who had coached her before board hearings, the one who toured roll call rooms and left silver dollar words in the air. His badge had old digits, a length that belonged to another era. It sounds like a badge, Maggie said. Whose? Charles said. Harlan King, Maggie said. The rain hissed harder and the neon flickered, as if the city had heard the name and did not approve. By morning, the city had a fresh skin and no memory. Maggie and Charles stood in the evidence room under buzzing lights and a posted poster about chain of custody that everyone ignored when the pressure was real. A half-dozen cardboard boxes hunched on metal shelves. Ink stamps bled through manila envelopes. The radio in the far corner crackled with dispatch traffic. The calendar on the wall had circles around court days and a smiley face that felt like a dare. Play it again, Charles said. Maggie set the field recorder down and hit the button. The scratch played. The numbers followed. She traced the sequence with a felt pen across a sheet of copy paper and wrote the letters the way she used to do when bored in the academy. The dashes made sense. The dots made something almost legible. The numbers cross-hatched with a case list on the computer terminal in a way that made her stomach pull tight. It's the case number of a shooting from 9 years ago, Maggie said. Which shooting? Charles asked. The warehouse off Selby, Maggie said. 3 suspects, 1 officer wounded. Chief King ran point when he was still deputy. The internal file is flagged locked. Someone wants us to drag an old ghost into daylight, Charles said. Or someone wants us to forget the new one by chasing it, Maggie said. The evidence clerk, Rita Monroe, a woman with calm hands and a habit of looking at the floor when the news was bad, walked in with a clipboard. You pulled the alley tape without a log, Rita said. We will sign it, Maggie said. I had 2 phone calls about your pull before I poured coffee, Rita said. Who? Charles asked. Not names, I should say, in here, Rita said. Rita slid a file across the table. Maggie opened it. The file held photocopies of envelopes stamped with a triangular sigil she did not recognize and a list of dates. The dates matched when Chief King had held closed-door briefings with command staff. The list came from an anonymous internal tip submitted through a portal that nobody trusted and everybody used when they were scared. Where did this come from? Maggie asked. Someone put it in my in-bin, Rita said. Are we being played? Charles asked. We are always being played, Maggie said. They sat in a cramped interrogation room that smelled like bleach and lost arguments. On the wall, a whiteboard with 3 names from 3 unsolved stared back at them. Maggie circled the Selby case number and the badge digits. She thought about Mrs. Rivera, a woman whose voice the city used as wallpaper until a night like this one. She thought about loyalty, about mentorship, and about how easily a good name could be used as a weapon. Could Mrs. Rivera's misunderstood call be a deliberate message to mislead us from a greater truth? Maggie asked. Ask the better question, Charles said. What better question? Maggie asked. Who benefits if we turn on Harlan? Charles said. People with a reason to hate him, Maggie said. People with something to hide behind him, Charles said. They pulled the Selby file from storage and hit a wall of ink. Key pages were redacted so thoroughly they looked like art. A memo tucked at the back mentioned a confidential informant who had vanished in the days after the raid. A typed note along the margin referenced the city attorney's office and a judge known to lunch with power. The envelope stamp with the strange triangle appeared again, pressed half over a date. Look at these marks, Charles said. They mirror the rhythm, Maggie said. A stamp that taps, Charles said. Maggie's phone vibrated against the table. She glanced down. An unsaved number glowed on the screen and the message was short. "Not everything is as it appears," Maggie read aloud. "We are on a stage we did not build," Charles said. "Then we do not perform the script they picked," Maggie said. The message hung in the stale air like the smell of thunder. Maggie watched the door, felt the sink of her chair, and reminded herself why they still put on the badge. The smallest sound could be a scream. If she had to, she would be the listener the city needed, because too many days, no one else was. She slid the Selby file toward Charles and tapped the numbers again. "Find who logged the original scratch in the maintenance report," Maggie said. "And I look at camera coverage facing that alley," Charles said. "Also find me Mrs. Rivera," Maggie said. Maggie hit call on the number that had just texted. It rang once and died. The room seemed to pull tighter around them. "We do not say King's name in the wrong place," Charles said. "We do not say it where the walls have ears," Maggie said. They stood, their chairs scraping the floor, and the light over the table buzzed a little louder, as if the evidence room itself did not like what they carried out. They waited until the streetlight stuttered awake and the shadows thickened in the corners. The alley behind Mrs. Rivera's building wore the same slick shine as the night before. Maggie and Charles moved along the brick like they were part of it, the way they always did when truth liked to hide in plain sight. In the third-floor window, a curtain flicked, and then Mrs. Delirious Rivera appeared in the doorway off the stairwell, her cardigan pulled close. "Mrs. Rivera, I am Detective Thompson," Maggie said. "I know you," Mrs. Rivera said. "We heard your recording," Charles said. "I told the man the scratch was a word," Mrs. Rivera said. "What did you hear besides the scratch?" Maggie asked. "A voice in the hallway said to call if I heard it again," Mrs. Rivera said. "What voice?" Charles asked. "Someone with a police voice," Mrs. Rivera said, "the kind that tells you to sit and you sit." "Did he give a name?" Maggie asked. "No," Mrs. Rivera said. Mrs. Rivera's eyes were clear under the worry. Maggie saw a life that had been handled by systems more than by people. The faint tremor in her hands wrote a story of long shifts and colder rooms. She unlocked a kitchen drawer and laid a small notebook on the table. In careful block letters, she had written down sequences of long and short sounds from nights when the scratch had come and gone. "I thought I was crazy," Mrs. Rivera said. "You were correct," Maggie said. "You believed me," Mrs. Rivera said. "Always," Maggie said. They returned to the alley. The scrape marks led to a parking space by the storm drain. Maggie crouched and found a fresh cigarette butt pressed into the wet grit, filter crushed by a heel. Charles bagged it and squinted down the block at a camera mounted under a hardware store awning. "I will argue for the footage," Charles said. "Argue hard," Maggie said. Their phones chimed at the same time, a calendar alert neither had set. A blank event filled the screen with Selby spelled in capital letters and a timestamp in 20 minutes. Charles looked up and scanned the rooftops. Maggie felt watched. She did not like it. "Someone is in our calendar," Charles said. "Someone wants us at Selby," Maggie said. They drove to the old warehouse, its windows painted black and padlocks new, where the doors had once gaped. A note was taped to the side entrance, a single page folded twice. "Do not bring this inside," Charles read aloud. "Who left it?" Maggie asked. Charles looked at the corners of the lot and the ridge of roof lines. The note unfolded with a whisper. It was a letter on department letterhead, typed and unsigned. It named Chief Harlan King and a longtime colleague, Lieutenant Nina Hale, as recipients of a sealed memo about an informant who could expose a finance network that fed contractors off city contracts. The last line was handwritten, a scrawl that looked like impatience. "You investigate me and you betray me," Maggie read. It felt like a trap. It felt like a test of faith. Charles took a step back and scanned again. A phone in Maggie's pocket rang, a number she did not recognize. She answered. "Detective Thompson," Maggie said. "Your next move could be your last," an unknown voice said. "Who is this?" Maggie asked. "The one who cares about how many of you walk away," the unknown voice said. "You sounded like a cop," Maggie said. "I sound like survival," the unknown voice said. He hung up. The lot went still. A seagull called somewhere you could not see. Charles looked at the fence where someone had mended a hole too neatly. "This is a compass with a magnet next to it," Charles said. Then we pull the magnet off the table, Maggie said. A sedan pulled into the far end of the lot and stopped close enough to read their plates, but far enough to make a statement. A man stepped out, shoulders hunched against the drizzle. Finn Calder, a confidential informant from 3 cases ago. A man who had saved his own skin by saving someone else's. He looked smaller than he should. "I need off this stage," Finn said. "You put us on it," Maggie said. "I'm telling you there is a hand above you," Finn said. "Whose hand?" Charles asked. "The kind that wears your badge when it needs to," Finn said. "What do you know about the scratch?" Maggie asked. "The scratch was theater," Finn said. "Real rhythm, wrong target. Follow the man who goes dark when he is supposed to be visible. Undercover loves the shadows. Someone in that world is writing your script." "Name," Charles said. "I give you my neck if I say it," Finn said. "You gave your neck when you drove here," Maggie said. Finn stared at the padlock, the rain, everything but them. He folded his arms and whispered like the night might punish him for volume. "You are staring at King like a portrait," Finn said. "But the painter is someone you call brother. When the light hits him, he looks like a hero." "Give us the brush," Maggie said. Finn lifted a shoulder without lifting his gaze. "It is bigger than one man," Finn said. "Bigger than King, bigger than whoever taught the scratch to sing. Ask who supplied the stamp. Ask who checks the evidence room after dark." Finn walked back to his car and left them with the sound of his tires on wet gravel. The warehouse loomed like a story with the middle ripped out. "Undercover," Charles said. "Which one?" Maggie asked. "Think of the ones we trust," Charles said. "We will have to choose to move against our own," Maggie said. The wind shifted. Somewhere behind the walls, the past turned over in its sleep. By noon the next day, the precinct felt like a mouthful of teeth. Everyone smiled and no one bit until the door shut. Maggie and Charles walked the hall with faces that said nothing. A rumor ran ahead of them like electricity. They did not feed it. They went to the small office where cases that did not fit the memo lived. Officer Priya Desai, a uniform with more courage than years, already waited by the door. "Your clerk told me someone accessed your evidence pool after you left," Officer Desai said. "Who?" Maggie asked. "It logged as a maintenance check," Officer Desai said. "Maintenance now uses our forms," Charles said. "They used the exact form you used," Officer Desai said. "The stamp on the signature is the triangle you asked me to find." Sergeant Kenny Wu slid in behind them, the weight of a conscience that had stopped looking for permission working in his jaw. "We will help," Sergeant Wu said. "Thank you," Maggie said. They moved through camera logs. Detective Troy Vance, 41 from the undercover unit, moved like an idea through their screens. Vance had a reputation for patience in long games and a smile that worked in any room. He also had a habit, clear as rain once you looked. He disappeared for hours at a time on days when the triangle stamp hit a file. "Undercover," Charles said. "Loved by the team," Sergeant Wu said. "Protected by the chief," Officer Desai said. "Visible only when it serves him," Maggie said. Maggie's phone buzzed again. A photo parked itself in her messages. The picture showed their evidence locker open with a small object on the shelf, a metronome scuffed and taped over at the base, the kind a musician would use to keep time. The text under it read, "Bring a warrant or bring teeth." 5 minutes later, they were standing at the locker. The metronome was gone. The shelf held only a clean square where it had sat. "They want us to know how close we are," Charles said. "Or how helpless," Sergeant Wu said. "We have their picture," Officer Desai said. "We have the idea they want us to carry," Maggie said. A midnight meeting at a club that could not decide if it wanted to be a restaurant drew them to a back booth. The heartbeat of the place thumped through the seats. Mrs. Rivera shuffled in with a tote bag and a chin held higher than the world had asked of her. "I have something to tell you," Mrs. Rivera said. "What?" Maggie asked. 2 weeks ago, a man asked me to help expose a liar," Mrs. Rivera said. "He said the police needed me, or else bad men would win. He told me to call when I heard the scratch like rain on a window. He told me to mention a badge number if I could. He said the number would make them listen." "What did he look like?" Charles asked. He looked like any man who has been told yes his whole life, Mrs. Rivera said. Did he give a name? Maggie asked. He called himself Troy, Mrs. Rivera said. Maggie held the table edge until her fingers hurt. Charles looked at the bar, the mirror, the way a good man's face can break when an old belief gives way. He used you, Maggie said. He used my belief that small sounds can save lives, Mrs. Rivera said. He was not wrong about the sound, Maggie said. He was wrong about the target, Charles said. Maggie thought about Harlan King in the hallway, about the way he placed a hand on a shoulder and made a promise that the rest of the day struggled to keep. She thought about Finn's warning. She thought about her own reputation in a precinct that would turn on you with a smile if you dented its picture frames. The room drained of noise. The music shifted. They stood and they left Mrs. Rivera with a promise, because promises were currency, when evidence vanished. Maggie reached back and squeezed Mrs. Rivera's shoulder lightly. You did good, Maggie said. I did what I could, Mrs. Rivera said. They went back to the precinct and found the evidence lockup door ajar. Inside, the shelf with the clean square had company. 3 other clean squares sat in a row like missing teeth. Charles bent to read the catalog numbers taped to the shelf edge. Every piece that touches Vance, Charles said. We just lost our leverage, Sergeant Wu said. Not all of it, Officer Desai said. We still have the woman they thought did not count, Maggie said. The phone on the wall rang. An old landline that nobody touched anymore. Charles answered on instinct. Read, Charles said. You're not meant to win this, the unknown voice said. That is why we will, Charles said. The line went dead. The fluorescent light over their heads flickered and hummed, the way a tired room does when it wants to be left in peace and knows it will not be. They looked at each other and saw it in the other's face. The decision had been made. They would step into a room with a man they had trusted and force truth out of it, even if it burned them. The warehouse at the end of Bayfront Road had a roof that bowed like an exhausted back. Rain came in sideways sheets, a curtain that erased the world beyond 10 feet. Maggie and Charles walked into the echo and felt the old concrete talk to their souls. Sergeant Wu and Officer Desai moved along the edges with the quiet of hunters who also happened to be cops. A truck sat in the middle of the space, doors open, emergency lights pulsing red against rivets. Troy Vance, police, Maggie said. Detective Troy Vance stepped out from behind the truck, his hands open and his smile designed to close distance. He wore plain clothes that fit like he had paid full price. His eyes did not blink enough, and his voice carried like a radio even when he whispered. You brought a team, Detective Vance said. You brought a city, Maggie said. You should be thanking me, Detective Vance said. For using a woman's fear to point us at our own, Charles said. For daring to do what the brass would not, Detective Vance said. You framed Chief King, Maggie said. I gave the city a choice, Detective Vance said. You planted the Morse to make us chase him, Charles said. He was in the way of the truth, Detective Vance said. Whose truth? Maggie asked. My partner died on Selby, Detective Vance said. We had a line on a leak in the department feeding our targets. King shut down the operation and sealed the file. He called it protection. He called it strategy. I call it a man who chose reputation over justice. Did you ask why he shut it down? Maggie asked. I did not need his excuses, Detective Vance said. You needed revenge, Charles said. I needed a light bright enough to burn the shadows, Detective Vance said. You found a way to make us light it for you, Maggie said. You did your job, Detective Vance said. We listened to a woman who cares about her city, Maggie said. You used her voice to carry your story, Charles said. Officer Desai moved 3 steps to the right, Sergeant Wu 2 steps to the left, the geometry of an arrest drawing itself on the floor. Rain hissed through the broken panes. Maggie felt the moment tilt. King was shielding more than himself, Maggie said. You believe that because you want to, Detective Vance said. King told me this morning, Maggie said. When did you speak to him? Detective Vance asked. In a hallway where he stopped being a portrait, Maggie said. He asked us to draw fire while he worked a case with a joint team. He had evidence the leak fed money into contracts that bought influence. He sealed Selby because the informant was about to take them higher. The informant vanished because someone pushed him off the board. Your partner died in a machine he tried to unplug. So he buried the truth, Detective Vance said. He held it close while he tried to cut the bigger piece out, Maggie said. He failed, Detective Vance said. And you helped them by pointing our guns at the wrong man, Charles said. Detective Vance's smile cracked. He shifted his weight. His hands did not look open anymore. I can still end it, Detective Vance said. You end it by telling the rest, Maggie said. Or I end it by walking, Detective Vance said. Not today, Officer Desai said. Officer Desai moved and the cuffs flashed. Detective Vance took a step like he was thinking of turning the world into a sprint. Sergeant Wu stepped in and planted a grip on his wrist that spoke of training and the decision to be heavy when you had to. The cuffs clicked. The sound said, "Final." Chief Harlan King stepped from the shadows at the back of the warehouse, a presence that brought the room up 2 degrees. 2 other officers flanked him, men Maggie trusted less than she used to, but enough to check a corner. "Stand down," Chief King said. "We are done standing," Maggie said. "Their anger is earned," Chief King said. "You let us swing in a storm without a coat," Charles said. "I made choices in the dark," Chief King said. "I thought I could hold the line without burning the house. I underestimated the cost." "You underestimated what your silence would invite," Maggie said. Chief King nodded once, the admission of a man who has done math and found a remainder he could not pay. He looked at Detective Vance with something like pity and something like the recognition of a man who could have been him in a different room. "I should have told you sooner," Chief King said. "You should have trusted the people who still know how to listen," Maggie said. They walked Vance out into the rain and into the back of a car that would not apologize for its rear seat. Officer Desai shut the door. Sergeant Wu took the keys and pocketed them like a vow. The warehouse exhaled. The storm kept on. The city did what it always did. It kept pretending and it kept confessing. Maggie looked at Chief King and saw the weight that showed up when the cameras were gone. "Where does this go from here?" Maggie asked. "We roll the network," Chief King said. "We take down the contracts, the bagmen, the strings into the courthouse. And yes, we expose the part of me that hid what should have been lit. That is the price I owe." "Justice has a receipt," Charles said. "It also has a rhythm," Maggie said. "Sometimes the smallest sound is the scream of an innocent against injustice." Chief King nodded, and his eyes went somewhere Maggie could not follow. The officer with him handed Maggie a small plastic bag. Inside was a thumb drive and a folded note. "Found taped to your car," the officer said. Maggie unfolded the note. The words were tidy as a ledger. "Phase 2 begins when the gavel falls," Maggie read. "Someone is ahead of us," Charles said. "Someone has been ahead since the first scratch," Maggie said. They stood at the edge of the warehouse and watched the rain turn the lot into a shallow lake. Priya Desai hugged Mrs. Rivera, who had come with Rita Monroe, because even in storms, the brave want to see where the lightning lands. Mrs. Rivera held her bag like a shield. "Did we help?" Mrs. Rivera asked. "You gave the city back a piece of its hearing," Maggie said. Mrs. Rivera's eyes shone. She nodded once like a bell rung softly. The car with Vance pulled away. Chief King stayed behind, the rain running off the brim of his hat. He looked smaller than the city's statue of him and more human than the walls allowed. "Take a breath," Charles said. "We do not get many," Maggie said. They walked to their car, their jackets heavy, their shoes loud in the puddles. The thumb drive felt like a stone in Maggie's pocket. Somewhere in it, a voice would make a new shape out of old compromises. They would decode those sounds, too. Rain mixed with the uncertainty in their eyes as they pulled out and the warehouse shrank in the rear view. In a city where betrayal could wear a badge and loyalty could be a wedge, they chose to keep listening. If justice was a rhythm, they would find it again tomorrow in the smallest knock, in the faintest scratch, in the sound that too many refused to hear.